Senator from Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to comment, along with my colleague, Senator Durbin, about the Sanders Amendment, and I must commend how thoughtful and knowledgeable Senator Durbin is about all these subjects. He's pointed out how there are too many military programs that are not well moderated, that have cost overruns, that result in excess cost to the American public. We have to do something about those things. And we also understand that we have huge demands with respect to non-defense spending that we have to meet also. The Sanders Amendment, as Senator Durbin pointed out, would impose a across-the-board cut to the Department of Defense except for military personnel accounts and defense health programs. What he would call a 10% across-the-board account when you take out health and personnel becomes really a 14% cut to all the accounts of the Department of Defense. And the danger, as so well illustrated by Senator Durbin, is this type of indiscriminate getting rid of the good and paying for the bad doesn't really work. It doesn't make sense. It reminds us all of the battles we had over sequestration, where departments, not only the Department of Defense, but the civilian departments, had to fund programs because they met the cap, and then cut other programs that were much more valuable because they exceeded the cap. That is not a way, as they proverbially say, to run a railroad, nor a Department of Defense. So we do have to look for specific areas to cut. And as Senator Durbin said, a great deal of that is done and will be done on the Appropriations Committee. I serve as a colleague. He is the ranking member. I'm a colleague on the committee. And we have each year the challenge of taking the authorization, which says you may do this, but actually putting the money to do it. And that effort is hugely valuable, as is the authorization effort, and critically important. And we have to make sure that we result in our deliberations with, first, the resources that are necessary to protect the men and women of the armed forces that protect us, and also to provide for the quality of life of their families. And then ultimately, of course, that we're able to deter any threat, and if not, defeat that threat decisively. This is a very important endeavor. And again, suggesting we just cut across the board and then put it someplace else, maybe across the board there also, is not, I think, commensurate with the kind of approach that we must take and we have to take going forward. The other factor, too, is there are real ramifications for this that are not sometimes obvious. There are literally thousands and thousands, not just of military personnel, but of civilian workers and construction workers and equipment manufacturing workers who, in this indiscriminate across-the-board cut, would lose their jobs at a time when we can't lose any jobs. This would be disruptive, this approach. I would not want to make a point to the disadvantages of the thousands and thousands of men and women who are working awfully hard to take care of their families all across this country. Again, we do have to make serious investments in communities across this country that have been neglected, and I've been consistent in support of those efforts. We do have to make efforts in our infrastructure for our economic viability and our economic efficiency. We do have to provide support in many, many different ways that transcends and goes beyond just the Department of Defense. In fact, one could say that just as vital a part of our national defense as is our military budget, is our education budgets and our health care budgets. Because our strength is not just military forces, our strength is knowledgeable citizens, our strength is healthy citizens, our strength is an efficient and economic system. But I think the approach, as I suggested today, and I think the suggestion from Senator Durbin also, was that this just across-the-board approach it's good for a headline, it's good for make a point, but we're here to make policy. And I hope we do make policy. I hope we can continue both in this National Authorization Act, Defense Authorization Act, to try to argue about issues that people feel are not appropriate spending, or in fact, we need more spending. And then once again, in the appropriations process, we will do that once again. Just as a reminder, this bill adheres to the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. It's the final year of the Budget Act. So the numbers we're talking about today for the Department of Defense are not willy-nilly. They were not negotiated without the context of non-defense spending. It was a bipartisan agreement to set the levels of spending for both defense and non-defense, and that is what we're doing here today. Now, we need a serious discussion about national spending priorities, not just defense spending priorities, but priorities with respect to poor communities, industrial policy, infrastructure, education, daycare, the impact of artificial intelligence on the workplace. We have a lot to do, and I think we should get on with doing it, but not with sort of shorthand messages of let's cut everything here and put it over there. Let's look at the serious issues and let's confront them and let's propose serious solutions. So because of these indiscriminate cuts, I would be forced to oppose this amendment by Senator Sanders. There is another amendment that will come before us today, and that is by Senator Tester, and this is one which I do support. Senator Tester's amendment will add additional diseases to those that the Veterans Administration already presumed are the result of exposure to Agent Orange by veterans during their military service in Vietnam. We know that exposure to this toxic chemical, Agent Orange, has had severe health consequences for veterans who answered their nation's call to military service during the Vietnam conflict. Recognizing this, the Veterans Administration already presumes that certain diseases affecting these veterans are service-connected as a result of their exposure to Agent Orange. These diseases include non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, soft tissue sarcoma, respiratory cancers, myeloma, and type 2 diabetes. We also know that there are other diseases that are not yet covered, and that there are veterans who suffer from these diseases. And this conclusion is supported by scientific review by the National Academy of Medicine. Parkinsonism, bladder cancer, and hypothyroidism should share the same presumption of service connection as the diseases already presumed to be service-connected. Our Vietnam veterans should not have the burden of proving by independent evidence that their diseases were caused by exposure to Agent Orange. The failure to add these conditions to Veterans Administration's presumptive list continues to deny sick and aging veterans the health care and compensation they have earned through service to our nation and that they desperately need. Senator Tester begins to remedy this inequity, and I urge all senators to vote for the Tester amendment. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr.